Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. My name is Josh Self, and I will be your host today. My guest today is Jenna Carroll. Jenna is a friend of a friend, and actually, if you go back to the very first episode of the On Adventure podcast, I interviewed a friend of mine named Brew Davis. Jenna was a fun conversation to talk to her about her trek from being a star athlete in high school and college to working with one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. And during COVID, making a big life pivot to do something totally different. And they're really cool to see how her story weaves through time as she took one step at a time to make a values-based decision on what she was going to do next. She decided in 2021 to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail, which isn't easy to do, but she completed it. She's done several hikes since then, several long-distance endurance pushes, and then this past summer decided to do the Appalachian Trail again, but with a little bit different angle. First of all, she went southbound instead of northbound, and she was also trying to break the fastest known time for a female self-supported hiker, which was held by Heather Anderson. And you'll have to listen to the rest of the story to hear whether she accomplished that or not. But more than anything, what was fascinating is some of the life lessons and stories that she got out of that trip. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jenna Carroll. All right, Jenna Carroll, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. And I'm super excited to have you here. So for spending the time this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Josh.
All right, we'll get into this, but there's very minimal degrees of separation between you and I and folks that we know and things that we've done. So what I would like to do is start just by having you tell folks who you are, where you live, and some of the things that you fill your free time with right now.
Yeah, so my name's Jenna. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I work down here as a hiking guide. So I work for a company called Blue Ridge Hiking Company. And I have been a guide for the last 3 years, as well as on the business side of the hiking company. So I do the administrative work, organize the trips, work in the shop, that kind of thing. And so that's pretty much been like my full-time gig for the last 3 years. And I got into the outdoors really after I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2021. So I had like a pretty traditional office job before that and decided I wanted like an adventure, a little break. And then I sort of fell in love with hiking and decided to pursue that. But yeah, so since then I've gotten really into when I first became a guide, I think I wanted to scout all the trails around here because we guide in a lot of different places in Western North Carolina. And so I just kind of would go out and scout the trails for work, but then I got super excited about exploring them just on my own and doing kind of endurance challenges around some of the trails here. So that's a lot of what I like to do with my free time is just hike and run around the trails here. But I don't know, Asheville's just a cool town in general too. So I like to hang out in the town and check out the art scene and different things like that. But that's pretty much me.
I'll ask you some questions around Asheville because obviously a lot has changed in the last few months since the hurricane. But I'm curious with your 2021 AT trek, was that like a couch to the trail kind of thing where you just kind of had a whim and went with it? Or had you like done these kind of things and so it really wasn't that far-fetched that you would go through hike the Appalachian Trail?
Well, so I wasn't an outdoorsy person at all growing up. I was a basketball player, and my whole family, we were always just in the gym playing basketball. That was our whole thing. So I was an athlete, and I had played basketball in college. And after I stopped playing basketball, I did get into like long distance running. So I ran a road marathon and just sort of did that to stay in shape. But I had my the house that I lived in when I like went back home from college, my mom ended up marrying a guy who lived right on the Appalachian Trail in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So that's like I kind of like got to see the trail community and was like really interested in what the thru hikers would come through the town there. It was Front Royal, Virginia, where they lived at the time. And I was like, what are these people doing? They had the backpacks and the, you know, the pads and the whole thing. And I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard that people walked the entire length of the trail in one go. I just thought, like, you had to be totally superhuman to do it, and I always just had in the back of my head, that's just, like, an incredibly amazing thing. So, that was I think the seed was planted there a little bit.
What year would that have been?
Well, when I was in college, probably, like, 2018 or something like that. So, maybe 3 or 4 years later, I made it happen.
Gotcha. Where'd you go to college?
I went to William and Mary, Virginia.
Oh yeah, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful campus.
Uh-huh, it's
Kind
gorgeous
of
there, yeah.
tucked back in the hills, and VMI is right down the road, right?
VMI is in Lexington, so further north, but,
I'm thinking of Washington and Lee, not William and
yeah,
Mary. Yeah,
Washington
yeah,
and Lee is closer to, like, the mountains there, but
yeah.
William and Mary's down in Williamsburg, closer to
Williamsburg.
Virginia
Yep.
Beach, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yep. That's also a very pretty part of Virginia as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Not near the mountains, but definitely some good nature down that way too.
And so you played basketball for 4 years there? Or
Played for 2 years, so I was a walk-on
okay.
on the team there, and, yeah, I quit after 2 years and switched to club, but I still love to stay connected with basketball. Also a high school basketball coach,
All right.
so I enjoy staying plugged in with basketball however I can.
Yeah, I mean that especially you get to college level, at any level, it becomes a job.
Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's a really, really big commitment. But I think youth sports now and probably were as you were growing up, like it is a lot more serious than it was 20 or 30
Yeah.
years ago. And you really do have to commit to it. And you to get to that level to be able to play, you would have had to put a ton of hours in the gym. And I'm sure you loved doing it, but it's still like a giant commitment. And when you switched to club, was that did you still have as much fun, or was it like, a notch down so it wasn't quite as
Oh, yeah, I had a
interesting?
lot more fun. Yeah,
A
when
lot
I
more fun.
switched to
Okay,
club,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's what you said, I wasn't maybe quite ready for that level of commitment, didn't really have I kinda wanted to be like the underdog story of making it from being a walk-on and trying to but it
Yeah.
was just I didn't have, I don't think, the tools to be able to do that or the skills really, so
You coach high school basketball now?
I'm not coaching this season, but I did coach last year, a JV team, yeah, a local
Okay.
high school here. But yeah, it's good fun, I like coaching.
That's awesome. All right, so that's gives me a little bit of background. You didn't really get into the outdoors growing up, but you had an athletic pursuit, which, again, that's a level of commitment. It takes a lot of endurance and stick to it, a kind of personality to play one sport for that long. And a lot of times I see that overlap into these adult adventures, right? I mean, most people don't just wake up one day and go, "I'm gonna go do these crazy feats," and then go do
Mhm.
it. There's a mental training and a physical training that goes with it. But there's still what was it in 2021 that like flipped the switch for you to go, "I'm done with this desk job stuff, and yeah, let's go walk 2,200 miles."
Well, I sort of just thought I didn't know what I wanted to do. I sort of had this I didn't really feel like I was in the job I had for any particular reason. It was kind of a similar career path to like what my mom and stepdad had done. I think maybe that's sort of just I just picked something that I saw but it didn't really have any connection with anything that I thought I wanted to do. So I just kind of wanted a little bit of like a self-discovery journey and see like meet other sorts of people and just get ideas maybe about life. I think that's what I was thinking at the time, but at the time it also just felt like I wanted like some sort of a break or some sort of an adventure. I feel like I hadn't really done that. I'd just been on sort of a track. And yeah, so I think I was just looking for something different, some new perspectives. And I had always loved like the idea of like a physical and mental challenge. I really wasn't sure if I would be able to do it because like when you first hear that people go and walk 2,000 miles in one go, you're like, how do you possibly do that? It's
Oh,
just and it is. When I finished, I thought, I can't believe I did that. Like that's just an incredible thing. I still think about it when I see people through hiking. I just think
mhm.
it's just incredible that people do this. And so I just wanted to test, having been an athlete and having always been interested in limits and pushing myself both physically and mentally in that combination. I think that's what drew me to that particular challenge, as well as feeling like I hadn't explored or been really exposed to the outdoors in any kind of meaningful way. I kind of felt pulled to explore that a little bit more.
Mm. Nature was calling.
As nature calls.
Yeah, there was a question I had in there. Did you ever have like a serious injury with basketball?
I wouldn't say I had some chronic injuries like shin splints and
Yeah.
knee issues, but nothing like super serious, no.
Did any of that spike when you were on the trail? Like get really bad?
No, in
Really?
fact, the trail I thought was, I wasn't like a speed demon by any means on the trail. When I thru hiked, took 6 months to do it, so I was, went at a
You
pretty
were
reasonable.
enjoying your time out there.
I was enjoying my time for sure, I think the trail was actually really like kind on my body as compared to the hardwood floor. And I did a good job on my first hike of like I would do yoga at camp every day
Okay.
after walking, and just like I think it's really helpful actually hiking for strengthening your body and getting your body to a point where it's not injuries are a little bit, it's can help with injury prevention if you build up those muscles over time.
Did you hike northbound?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you started like spring or was it more yeah, it would have had been spring if you were 6 months.
Yeah, late
Yeah,
March I
gotcha.
started.
How long did it take you to get your trail legs? Like where you really felt somewhat
Um,
comfortable during the day?
I would say like probably 3 weeks or
Okay.
so. Yeah. The first week, I was sore every single day. That was rough. I was started like really I didn't have a lot of muscle on me at all. I was like a stick. I'm actually, I think, one of the few people I know who gained weight after I'd finished because I had
Wow.
really not a lot of muscle on me, and by the end I
Yeah.
had some muscle on my legs.
Yeah. So what was, and I know you've done the trail since then, you've done other stuff since 2021, but in this first one, are there any moments that you look back and go like that was really tough moment or even scary? Like, were there any moments that you look back on and just kind of, think of it not in a negative term, but like just
Yeah.
a really bad point?
Yeah, I think there was a turning point for me, like, it was about 4 days in, where there was some rough weather coming in. It was kinda like freezing rain type of deal in North Georgia there, and I was hiking by myself, and I'd seen some people go into town, and I was like, "If I'm gonna make it out here, like, I can't be going into town every time there's bad weather. I'm gonna stick it out," you know? And I was out camping by myself, and the wind was really whipping, and it was super, super cold. I couldn't sleep a wink. And, by the time the morning came around, my shoes had frozen. Everything, like my food bag was frozen to the tree. My hands were not like functional. I couldn't really use my hands, and I get really cold hands anyways. And I just overall don't do well in the cold, being a tall person with bad circulation. And so I was just so miserable at this point, just trying to figure out how to get myself out of this situation, thinking I'm not cut out for this. This is not something that's sustainable. I can't do this for 6 months, you know? So I figured, I was running around the campsite just trying to stay warm,
Oh my gosh.
and I was, like, trying to, like, rub the tent poles were frozen together too, so I was, like, trying to figure out how to rub the tent poles to, like, make them melt, so I could pack up camp and walk, because or else I was gonna get hypothermia. It was so
Yeah.
cold. And, so I'm, like, trying to get the shoes unfrozen. Eventually, I figured out I couldn't open my food bag, which I really wanted something to eat, so that wasn't good either, but eventually I got everything packed up and I started walking, and at that time I was walking up Blood Mountain there, which is probably one of the
That's
harder
a
climbs
tough
in
spot.
Georgia, yeah. But I was so grateful to be going uphill because I was like, "All right, at least we're getting warm here." And then, I got to the top of Blood Mountain and the sun came out and my food bag melted and I took out my frozen Cliff Bar. Had this like glorious moment of of like it's gonna be okay. I've got I've got some energy now, and that that afternoon I went and stopped it. I went into town there in Blairsville and got like a shower, and I met some friends that I had met earlier on, and got warm, dried out my stuff, went to like Mexican food dinner that night, and I just was so happy, so overjoyed. I'd never felt such bliss in my life, being at the dinner with these people, just being warm and dried, enjoying this social setting with these people who are also embarking on this adventure. I thought, I can do this. I can make it. Like that's so I think I learned a lot in terms of like the hard things, they can turn really quickly. Like you can recover quickly, and then you're gonna have opportunities to yeah, to recover and to
Yeah.
commune with other people about it too.
What do you think was created that bliss in that moment?
I think it was just that I felt like I had just, overcome the most dire obstacle of my life. I just
Yeah.
earlier that day I was just like when you're in those moments, you're like, I just gotta get out of this situation. And then once it's so it just a few hours later, you're like, I'm out of that situation and I'm
Hmm.
so happy. It just makes you feel like you can overcome a lot, I think. And of course looking back, it wasn't, it's you go through those kind of things in backpacking, but I think when you're in it and you realize you can make it through something that's challenging that they haven't done before, it gives you the confidence to be able to do it again and again.
Yeah, I love that. And I've found the same with backpacking that it started out as a novice making stupid mistakes, and but you get these little wins along the way that in the moment seemed like I'm going to die right here,
Yeah.
and you don't die right there. And you know it, and I see that in my kids too, as in any kid growing up, it's the little wins that build the confidence, that if somebody was, carrying your tent for you, or taking care of your food for you, you wouldn't have that opportunity to do it for yourself and prove to yourself that you can um, accomplish something and get out of a sticky situation. So,
Right, yeah.
and I'm sure 4 days into the journey, it made everything like seem worse. Probably if that had happened in the final 4 days of the trip, you might have shook it off like no big deal.
Right,
Uh,
yeah.
that's really interesting. Were there any other moments in that trip that were precarious in any way?
Precarious, I don't know, there was definitely some more meaningful moments. I don't know, I think that was probably the one that was, like, the hardship that I felt like I overcame and gave me the confidence to be able I had some snow in the Smokies, that was another one I can remember. I've always struggled with the cold, but that day, I just kinda booked it out of there, and it was my first day I got over maybe it was, like, 18 miles or something. I thought, wow, I can really put in some miles. I had only done like 12 miles before that or so. So, but no, I think I was always in a position where there were a lot of people around. Yeah, it's very social experience in a northbound hike. So I didn't ever feel like I was in really any trouble.
Did you enjoy that part of it, the social part, or are you a little more introverted?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that part of it. It was like kind of COVID era there, so I actually felt like I
Oh
had a
yeah,
more social
yeah,
experience on the trail than I was having in my life my work life says at the time because I was working remotely and just people weren't socializing. So I really did enjoy that part of it, and just the social dynamics and just and meeting all kinds of different people that were in different places in their lives and their careers. I thought that was really interesting to learn from people in that way.
yeah. That's cool. I mean, at 18 miles, if you're doing in that 15-mile range, it seems like I'm just trying to do the math. You took 6 months. Were there sections in there or time periods where you took a lot of zeros back to back, or
Oh no, 18 miles was definitely not typical for me. That was just me trying to get out of the cold in the Smokies.
that shows how much
I
you
was
dislike the cold.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we typically did like 12 miles a day, the group that I was in, and would spend a day in town usually. And when I got to Front Royal, where my family was, I spent like 4 or 5 days just hanging out and paddling on the river there and just enjoying that time with people that I knew there. There were a couple of other times. Some of the people I was hiking with hiked with a couple who had family up in Vermont, so we spent a little bit of time there as well. And just, I did a trip to New York City off of the trail, which
Off the
was
trail?
totally stimulation overload. I
Oh
had
my
one of my
gosh. Yeah.
childhood best friends was living in New York City at the time, so I thought, I had heard there was a train station right on the trail you could take into the city, so I thought, "Why not? I'll go give her a visit." And I can remember going into Grand Central Station, the lights and
Oh, I
people
bet.
were running, and I thought, what is happening?" Like, it was just totally a switch of mode, but and I also can remember I was walking down the city streets trying to find my friend's place, and on the trail, you say hi to everybody. You greet everybody, and then you're started saying hi to people on the streets in New York City, and they're, like, giving me death stares, and I remembered that you don't really do that in that environment.
That's funny. And
Yeah.
and it's very interesting that those two worlds really were not physically that far apart,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
But
I
you
know.
probably felt like you stepped on a different planet for a little while.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so talk to me a little bit about what life has been since you accomplished that, because it sounds like this whole 2021 experiment was really a pivot point in your life, because I don't think you went back to the desk job after that. So
Right, right,
kind
yeah.
of talk a little bit about what's happened since then.
Yeah, so I had the idea that I wanted to leave, like, the DC area, and so I had visited Asheville before, and Western North Carolina was really my favorite stretch. My favorite stretch of the whole trail was kind of the Southern Appalachians, Western North Carolina, Tennessee. And I just thought, and I knew that I had visited Asheville, and I knew that it was kind of like an artistic town, and I enjoyed the environment when I had come to visit. And so I actually took a leave of absence from my office job there, so we're still working remotely. So I just decided to move to Asheville. But after, some months doing few not really long, few months working that remote job, I just felt disconnected with it, and I wanted to work kind of more in the community and just feel more connected with the place that I was living in. And I had no idea of being a hiking guide, like, that wasn't my goal. I was applying to all kinds of different jobs of, like, local nonprofits and different things. I was already starting to do a few day hikes, trying to explore the trails, but I saw a job pop up for Blue Ridge Hiking Company as a guide, and I thought and I had heard of Jennifer Farr Davis before, who founded the company, and so I looked into it and thought maybe I'll just apply for that because I figured with the through hike, they do hire a lot of former through hikers as guides. We do there, so I just gave that a go, and it was such a great fit. I just really, really connected with the people there, and it was totally a really it has been a really meaningful professional experience for me because I worked at a super professional, like one of the biggest companies in the world. It was in management consulting. And so I was like wearing suits to work and working in the skyscraper. And so to come to then a small business that's in totally different industry and like the mission is really something that's connected to what I love to do with my free time now, and that's something that's totally changed my life in a lot of different ways. It's been a really cool path in terms of exploring that professionally as well.
So it doesn't sound like it was a thing that you didn't have this grand plan coming out of college of I'll do this and then that and then whatever. You've kind of, it seems like you've taken, well, one step and did that one step and then adjusted and reassessed, take one more step. But it seems to me that you're making those decisions kind of in line with what is really important to you. In my world as a financial advisor, we call that values-based decisions, but you're you seem to be very aligned with life and the things that you hold important. And there's people who go through their entire lives and are never capable of doing that. It's always pursuing a goal of that someone else said was a good idea, or accomplishing some other feat that seemed like a good idea but was never truly themselves. So you figured it out early, which is fantastic. And the where I was going with this is in with this transition, there had to have been a moment where it was like difficult, or I don't want to say dark, maybe dark, but I've heard a lot. And I've never through hiked the Appalachian Trail, but I've heard there's a really big downer on the backside of finishing and
Mm-hmm.
getting back to real world. And you've got this, exuberant high of completing what seemed like an unfinishable task, and then the emotional letdown of that, and then the okay, now what? So you transitioned to a new town. You maybe didn't know anybody. Was there a moment where you're like, "What am I doing?" Like,
Absolutely.
okay, all right,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I felt like that before I moved. This was like I had no idea what to do really, and I thought, "Well, let me just try this." And when I got to this new town, I still felt like that. I thought, "Well, what am I gonna do now?" You know? So there was definitely some darkness in there of like of what you say. I think just on a biological level too, it's just so many endorphins going. You're moving all day, the sun is on you, and you're in this social environment where people are just, the stimuli is just always very exciting, and it's just this grand adventure. And then you do come back to this place of, well, what is my life here? What do I do now in this environment, So there was that, but I think it's right that you can just take whatever feels like the next right step and just go with that.
did that leave you stuck at all, or was that a motivating like realization that, man, this sucks right now. I gotta do something else.
I think it was, in retrospect, motivating. It's
Was it?
sort it's but, you feel stuck in that when you're in that place, I think. But I think I definitely did wanna, move forward and get out of it, but I wasn't sure exactly how.
And so now you've got several years of guiding groups. Tell me a little bit about what groups you take. How far do you take them? Is it, are they challenging hikes, or are they intentionally not challenging? Tell me a little bit about what that mix looks like.
Yeah, so it's really cool. So Blue Ridge Hiking Company, we're based exclusively in Western North Carolina, so we guide in the Southern Appalachians on a lot of different trails. Most I guide day all most of our guides guide both day hikes and backpacking trips. So for day hiking, it's more of like tourists, young families, young couples, older people, just people visiting who are interested in seeing the nature and learning something about the history, flora, fauna, that kind of thing of the area, and more of like a curated kind of experience. But we also guide a lot of backpacking, which is more about teaching people the skills, how to backpack basically. So we do it from like a through hiker perspective, basically, of teaching people how to we give them the lightweight gear as part of the guided trip, teaching people how to pack up their pack, and then all of the skills while they're on trail of this is how you set up your tent and cook your food. And so the typical trip for that would be like 3 days and 2 nights is the standard trip. And a group trip might is a max of 7 hikers. People can also do private trips, but I would say between 5 or 6 hikers is typical for one of these group trip backpacking trips.
People come to you in the groups, or are you putting seven people together that don't know each other?
Putting 7 people together who don't know each other.
Oh,
Um,
wow. So
but
there's a relational dynamic that you gotta
yeah, oh yeah.
maneuver
But
through
it's
too.
always so that's but we'd also do private trips too where people come with their own group, and we can do that too. But I always think it's fascinating with the group dynamics because the trail really is such a unifying force. Like when you have that common experience of walking the same path and going through the same weather and kind of the same challenges throughout the day. Sometimes, like, I'll get to I'll get to my to where we start the trips, and I'll take a look at the group and think, how are these people going to mesh with each other? But then by the end, everybody's just, so bonded because of what they've accomplished. So it is cool to see that.
That's really interesting. Is that what you spend the majority of your days doing, or you're not coaching basketball anymore? What else, other hobbies or things that you spend your time on these days?
Yeah, so during the winter time, the hiking company work is more administrative. So setting up for the next season and doing all the I'm organizing first aid supplies and stuff like that
Okay.
at the moment. I'm actually about to start a 4-month gig with FEMA here
Oh, wow.
shortly because we got hit by the hurricane here. And so the hiking work is seasonal, so I have less work at the moment because our hiking season is March through early November or so.
Okay.
But yeah, so it is pretty seasonal work. But what else I like to do in my free time in outside work would be like running and hiking, like training for these races that I like to do, and then I like to write as well. So I usually take a class or two at a time of some kind of writing class from the university here or different groups in town here.
Do you like writing like short stories, poetry? What kind of
Poetry mostly, yeah.
really?
I've used to do quite a bit of like spoken word poetry around town here, and I've kind of switched over to more written stuff now, but I'm just kind of a hobbyist with that stuff. It's really interesting to meet the different creative people in Asheville. It's a very
Very
creative
creative. Yeah.
yeah, very creative town. And a lot of people similar to me kind of get their creative inspiration from the mountains here and from what they find in nature. So I always think that that's a really cool overlap.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you find that you hit peak creativity when you're out in the wilderness?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I think when did my first through hike, I had all of the preconceived notions about creativity that people have of like, "Oh, I'm not I had always been an athlete, and I
Hmm.
thought this is the
Yeah.
type of person I am. I'm not a creative
Either
person."
or. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And when I started hiking, I realized that's not true at all. I would have just poems come to me while I was walking, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was a part of my I just didn't even know that that was
That's cool. So
part of
you had
me."
like no fine arts or artistic things that you had pursued growing up. This just kind of, I mean, it's almost like it came out of a well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when I was really little, I would write stories, and I enjoyed reading and writing a lot when I was really little, but I kind of lost that. I lost that, when as I went through school and stuff, and just more so focused on sports and friends and that. And then when I was on the trail, I would read in my tent at night too. So I started reading some poetry and some different things. And I think that along with, just seeing all this new the nature that was new to me, I hadn't really spent time in nature. And so the stimulus of that, I think, sort of did bring up that creative side of me that I didn't really identify with.
Did you start writing it down, or were these just things that would pop up in your
Yeah,
head?
I did write some things when I was out there, and I would journal most nights too on that first hike, which I'm so glad that I did that because I'm sure those will be really fun to look back
Yeah.
at. Yeah. But yeah, I do. I know a lot of people too who find a lot of just value in that kind of like hiking slash creative practice. I think walking through the woods is definitely a good way to get the creative juices flowing.
So, riff a little bit about why you think, or where, yeah, the why these two things connect. What is it about the wilderness that turns a human being into a creative?
Um, well, I think that when you hike, you sort of and are kind of immersed in nature, you start to realize that there's not this like separation really. I always felt growing up that like I was all the things that I did were indoors. It was like a human-based kind of manufactured environment where outdoors is like a different thing. Like that's separate from what I do, and what the from like human life is different from like the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you spend time in nature, you realize, no, we're all just part of nature. Like this is all the same thing, really. You've made these civilizations, but really, this we have a place in this home where all the other, wild things live, and so I think when you try to make sense of that, it often comes through a creative outlet, and you try to like artists try to express their place in the world. I think nature unlocks that, and it unlocks it in ways that come out in this creative expression, whether it's visual arts or, ceramics or poetry for me. But there's something about that place of belonging in the natural world that, for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure, it kind of does lend itself to these creative endeavors.
Yeah, there's some very smart people that have published things on these kind of connections, but it's wild to me that how consistent that is. Do you get a sense of like awe about being out, like a feeling of just a small little thing in a really big universe? Is that part of the creative experience for you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess you just can't, maybe some people can get that in a big city or in a basketball gym or some other manufactured place, as you put it. But it's like almost guaranteed. It seems like when you're in the backcountry or in an open space that is just really, really big. So what have you done with that? Have you published any of your work, or do you think you'll ever publish anything, or is it just for you?
So far it's been mostly for me, but I have shared it kind of with just friends and in communities locally here. I think, I've always I've thought of it as sort of a hobby, but I would like to, yeah, at some point maybe just figure out where I want to go with it. But I'm content with just sort of playing with it now and trying to
Mm.
learn from other people in Asheville here, and just, yeah, just experimenting with it and seeing where it goes. I do think it's just a fulfilling thing for anybody to have any kind of creative practice in their life, no matter if they do anything serious with it or not.
Mhm.
But yeah, I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Gotcha. All right, let me shift gears on you a little bit. You've gotten into longer distance trail running, which is almost a guaranteed sufferfest. No matter what trail you're doing for a long period of time. Why'd you get into that? What was it that was appealing to spend your time doing that?
Well, I can remember I've thought about this, and I can remember that, as I mentioned, when I got this job as a hiking guide, I started scouting all the trails around Western North Carolina so I could guide people on them. And I loved that. I just thought it was so fun to go and explore these trails. And, having through hiked, I was a decent hiker when I came to Asheville, but I just started to really enjoy doing big hikes just so I could cover miles on these trails and figure
Mm.
out and just explore them all. And so then, at one point I remember I was walking in the trails in Montreat in Black Mountain, and I thought, I think I've probably done all most of the trails in here. The Montreat Wilderness is maybe like 40 miles worth of 30 something miles worth of trails.
Mhm.
And I thought, I wonder if I could do them all in a day. Like that might be a fun thing to just see if I could do it. So I tried that, and it was so fun. Like it was so hard. I got the map and was like, I had my car and I was just marking off trails as I went. And I probably could have logistically planned it to do less miles, but I think I ended up doing around 40 miles or so that day.
Wow.
And I just thought, that was just so fun. Like, I just thought it was, like, amazing that I was able to do it. I had never thought that I could ever hike that many miles in a day, but just, like, it was a meaningful set of trails to me. Like, I had
Mhm.
really enjoyed my time in that space, in that wilderness space. So to connect with it in a different way from, like, my athletic side was really
Mhm.
something that I thought was cool.
So you ran the 40 miles, or
No, I just hiked them.
you just
Yeah,
hiked it? I gotcha.
yeah. Yeah, and I should say
When
I did my first year, guess that was probably after my first year at the hiking company. I did sign up for a 50K, so 30-mile race. And to say that I ran that would be generous. I finished it though, because I think we sold some different books in the shop that I worked at, and I still work there. And some of them were trail. I remember there was this book, A Beautiful Work in Progress by Myrna Valerio, and she's a really cool athlete, and she just does all kinds of adventuring, and she's just like it sound super accessible to do these things. So I thought, and I was kind of intimidated by ultramarathon running and thought it sounded crazy and like you had to be some sort of superhuman at birth to be able to do that kind of thing. But I read her book and I was like, I guess I could try this. I've already through hiked, like I might as well go for it. And so there were certain other books that were in the shop like that too. But I didn't run, but I finished it. But yeah, that's sort of some of the inspiration for how I got into it.
I think very few people actually mostly run trail races. It's a lot of sledge walk, like zombie walking up the big hills and being able to sustain that energy for a really long time. What's the longest you've done so far?
In a day.
No, just at one time, a race or a circuit of any sort.
Well, I mean, the longest that I've done is the AT, which I did in an endurance capacity this past summer. For me anyway, it was an endurance push, but the one I think of that was kind of the longest, which was in a day, was Pitchell, the run from Mount Pisgah to
Hmm.
Mount Mitchell. And so those two, I guess, would be like my longer ones.
What time of day did you start that?
I started at 8 p.m. on Mount Pisgah because
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that the park wouldn't close by the time I finished. I had no idea if I was going to be able to finish in a day or not, but
Yeah. That seems like a cool route. I've talked to Brew Davis, who introduced us, has obviously done it. Adam, is it Adam Hill, who I interviewed last year up in Black Mountain? I think Brew credits him for creating that route.
yeah, yeah. Everybody that I've heard him credited for
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and I think he's done it several times. But it just the section of Pisgah that you're going through just seems like it's a pretty beautiful spot.
Well, yeah. So living in Asheville, it basically is just running down into the valley where Asheville is, running through Asheville, and then running up north towards Mount
Oh,
Mitchell, which is the
okay.
highest peak on the East Coast. So
Yeah.
it's this totally epic thing of like, for me, it was about like we guide on that trail very frequently for a hiking company, and you know, done the trail mostly, and it just had all these cool experiences with
Mhm.
clients on the trail, and so yeah, for me, I just thought that would be the most epic day hike of all time to do all of that in a day. Let me go for that.
Yeah.
So that was the thought there.
Yeah, and this gets me to, maybe a final point here, but again, it seems like you do these things and then you go, well, I'll try this one more thing. Like I'm on this trail all the time. What if I just did it all at once?
Yeah.
And that'd be kind of cool. And so you just mentioned it was, I believe, this past summer you went back and through hike the AT, but this time with a little bit different purpose or goal in mind. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to hike the AT again, and I had just been the style that I like to hike now is kind of like with this endurance kind of mindset. And so I wasn't sure. I kept changing. I think when I decided I wanted to go and through hike it again, of like what my goal was with it.
Mhm.
So at first I was like, well, I just want to do it quickly, like I'll do it in 3 months or something.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I've been doing some big hiking, like maybe I'll try for 2 months, you know? And then I think I was talking to my brother one time, and he's like, well, I looked up like the fastest anybody's backpacked, and it sounds like, this woman did it in 54 days. You should try for that. So I decided I wanted to try for Heather Anderson's record on the trail, which was 54 days. And she's been a huge inspiration for me. I had read her books too, just some time over the past few years. And she's somebody too who's just an incredible writer. I just think that her stories are so, I had been totally in awe of her physical feats, but more so about her connecting it with her life and her lineage, and just her as a writer, she really inspired me. And so I just think that style of doing it too. I had pretty much just always been a backpacker mostly. And so when I started doing it in an endurance style, I would just backpack just faster, And so the idea of doing it like self-supported is really cool to me. You just kind of are like, because you have to kind of manage all of the physical challenges that come with like doing some sort of race or something where there's aid stations and
Hmm.
there's people that are there to cheer you on. But to backpack and do that at the same time adds this kind of really cool crossover to me of like backpacking skills and like um
Athletic endurance.
athletic ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, the AT had just meant so much to me, and totally, as we went over, changed my life in such a dramatic way that I really wanted that experience on the AT. So that's what I set out to do. And I had no idea. I didn't even think I would finish really, because I was like, this is just so long. This is so far beyond the pale of anything that I've tried. So I ended up finishing in 63 days, which
Wow.
I was proud of. You know, I
That's
was
incredible.
yeah.
When did you start?
I started July 1st.
Is there a reason you started in the summer instead of the springtime? Was it just to avoid the
Oh, yeah,
cold?
I do so much better in the heat. Yeah. I I'm happy to hike in the humidity and the heat. I'm more than happy to do it.
Wow. And you were northbound on this one too?
I went south this time,
Oh, you
yeah,
went
which
southbound.
was
Okay.
another thing that I really wanted to do. I just wanted to hike the trail south, like, to experience it the other way and just see. Especially, I thought it would be cool to, like, hike towards what I consider to be home now in terms of the mountains of, like,
Hmm.
I just know the Southern Appalachians so well now that I wanted to, like, have that as my destination.
Hmm.
So that was a cool way to be able to go the other direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, this past summer, Tara Dower, I believe, is that how you say her last name?
Yeah,
Broke the
yeah.
broke the FKT, but she was supported. She had support all along the way, which is still obviously an incredible feat.
She's such a badass. That was
Yeah.
crazy. That
Yeah.
was
That was
totally
fun to
incredible.
watch.
Yeah. And she's been an inspiration for me as well, because she was used to be the caretaker actually at the bunkhouse
Oh, did she really?
at at the hiking company, yeah.
Okay.
And so
All
I
right.
never knew her, but I'd sort of followed her and watched, her do these kind of really cool, crazy trail endeavors. And that's one of the really cool things too that I love, especially about like watching the like endurance athletes on these long, super long trails, is that
Mhm.
the gender, there's not really a gender barrier there in terms of performance on the long trails. So like
A
just
little more of an
as like a
equalizer.
right, yeah. So to have a woman be the fastest person ever to traverse the Appalachian Trail is just it's just cool.
Yeah,
It's really
right.
cool.
To be clear, she didn't break the women's record. She broke the record,
That's
man or
right. Yeah.
woman. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Jennifer Farr Davis. She held the record several years ago, and I'm sure someone else will come along and break it,
Hmm.
which is really cool to see these FKTs just kind of keep pushing limits. But you know, I want to go back to your 63 days. That is just the quick math. That's about 35 miles a day. You did or did not run any of that.
I did not run.
So those are long hiking days.
Yeah.
uh, how was that experience different than your first time? Was it, I'm imagining it's more difficult, but in what ways was it more difficult than the first time that took you 6 months?
Um, I it was it was more difficult mentally, I think, for sure. Like, I don't actually know that it was more difficult, which sounds crazy. I still feel like hiking the AT the first time was the most incredible athletic endeavor that I'll ever accomplish. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
but this hike was really hard because I was by myself the whole time. And as you mentioned, long hiking days, when you are going through struggles on the trail in a traditional through hike, usually there's people you can kind of take breaks and go to town and kind of break it up with these social experiences. Whereas I just spent so much time in my own head that I began to understand why like solitary confinement is like a torture
Mm,
punishment,
yeah.
because I just there wasn't that social element, and so that was hard. That was really hard, I think, for me, and I
Did
didn't.
you start having like, I mean, maybe hallucinations, but were there moments where your brain was really starting to trick you about what was reality and what wasn't? Did it ever get?
Yeah, actually, towards the end, when I was trying to make a final push, I
Mhm.
started to see like Dementors, like Harry Potter style Dementors.
Holy crap!
um,
Oh my gosh.
but and there were a few times where I was just so tired. I really didn't like I didn't have the skills that I think a lot of the people who are successful with these self-supported things have in terms of like efficiency and just like being I was really sleep deprived. And so sometimes I would get to camp and I would just be sort of confused about or I would get to where some place where I wanted to keep hiking and I would be confused as to where the trail was or I would just I think there were certain points where I was like not the whole time I wasn't really all there, basically. So that adds another challenging element to it.
Well, what did you do? How did you get over survive that and still keep plugging away in the right direction?
Well, I think for my sanity, I called people. I called like my family sometimes and just tried to have them listen to me. I was like,
Mhm,
just say like, this is really hard. Can you
mhm.
distract me? Can you tell me what's going on in your life? And I would just try to do that. But otherwise, I tried to, if I felt like I was getting to a place where I needed more sleep, like I was starting to wobble on trail, then I would try to get like another half hour or hour of sleep the next night. But I think overall I just sort of just went with it and kept pushing through.
Wow.
Mm.
What time did you normally set up camp and go to sleep?
I would normally s- it kind of varied, but I think a typical hiking day would have been like 5:30 to 11 or something like that.
Gosh.
But but I would set up camp anywhere between like 9:30 and 11 every day usually. Yeah.
And then but 5:30, you were up and packing and going?
It varied a little bit. I did have trouble getting up and getting going. And so I started off with aspirations of getting out of like at like 5. And it was usually between 5 and 6 every day. 5:30 was probably a typical time I would leave camp.
Yeah. And I'm sure there weren't many people keeping pace with you. So, you're seeing people as you pass them, but you're really not coming across the same people on the trail, which is probably a different experience than the first time where you kind of,
Yeah.
yo-yo back and forth between groups and see the same people pretty regularly.
Yeah, I think some of the most memorable times, there were 2 times on the trail where I was able to hike with somebody for like half a day who had like a similar pace, and those were just they would carry me for days after that. I would think about the social interaction with this person, I would think about this person's life and while I was hiking with these 2 individuals, like it was distracting, it was so helpful, and I would watch them hike and they were hiking their normal pace, which was fast, but it would help me to be able to keep up with them. And just when you have somebody there who's in front and you can follow them, it's so much
Mhm.
easier. It really is. But but yeah, and it's really true about any social interaction I had, whether it was in town or just, I'd pick up my resupply boxes and got to talk to like the hostel people who were
Mhm.
holding my box or something, or the other hikers who were staying there. It just was so life-giving, to have those social interactions.
Did you expect that to be such a point of suffering through the trip?
No, I mean, I
Really?
thought I didn't really even account for that part of it. I just thought, well, I wonder if I can how many miles I can hike in a day, and it's kind of what I was thinking, but that social emotional aspect, I think was a surprising like anchor of it for me.
What did you do when you started seeing Dementors? That's
Well,
wild.
at that point, I was at the finish basically. So I was just so the last day actually in Brew, who are my friends from Asheville here, came and hiked with me the last day. So they were able to keep my head on straight, I
Okay.
guess, and make sure I didn't fall off the mountain or anything. But I was in a rough spot that
Oh
last day.
my goodness.
I think it was the very last night. W- I had the idea that I was gonna just try to just get a few hours of sleep that last night because I wanted to make a final push to finish. But there was a really bad storm that came through and it was cold. And so I decided to stop in my tent. I was gonna sleep, like 3 or 4 hours or something. But that last night, all my stuff was soaked, which was the first time that had happened to me
Oh
the whole
wow.
night. And so I tried to sleep for like a couple hours in like all this wet, sleeping bag and wet
Uh,
clothes, but I couldn't. And so basically I didn't get any sleep the last like 48 hours, so that's why I was in like a really bonked out state, I
yeah.
guess.
So you finished, that would have been around like Labor Day if you started July 1st?
Yeah,
Okay.
September 3rd, I think was the date I finished.
When did Tara finish?
She was later.
Okay.
She was like a month later. I think she started in August, like mid-August or something.
And she was going southbound too because she finished at
Yeah.
Springer. So you guys never overlapped then.
No, no.
Okay. I am curious what with the obviously you went into it knowing that it was going to suck at points and that you were choosing suffering, but what did you learn through surviving that?
I guess it's like sort of what you were saying before. I thought, when I was in it, I thought this is so ridiculous and miserable. I don't know why I signed up for this.
Nobody's making me be out here.
I know the fact that I'm doing this by choice is just like this is just, you know, you can't rationalize this. But
Right.
then I think when I finished, I thought like I really did that, and I was capable of doing it, and I'm so proud that I did it. And I thought like there were a lot of times where like starting off, like I mentioned, I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish, and I sort of like didn't prepare in a way that was the most helpful to me. Like logistically, I sort of half-assed it and was like, "Well, I don't know if I'm even gonna be able to finish anyway." So, like, I'll send my boxes and, like, I'll try, but we'll just see what happens. But then when I finished, I thought, like, if I had really sort of trained properly and I had, like, done my logistical, like, homework better, I was like, I 'cause, and I started thinking, like, it really is. It's like what you say, like, you just kind of take one more step. You're like, "Okay, I did that. I could do that." And so
Yeah.
I think I just learned that what I learn every time I do one of these, like, backpacking or hiking crazy challenges, it's like that I'm capable of a lot, and that the other
Love
thing
that.
with this one the other thing with this one that I think was probably even more so was that I cannot, even though this was a self-support thing, I was out there by myself, I cannot do anything by myself. Like,
Mm,
if I didn't have these people to call, my family and, like, my hiking friends and mentors that were there for me in, like, the most meaningful ways, I could not have done it at all. I would have quit for sure. And the idea that these people are there for me in my life no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm like on the trail or somewhere else, that there's these people that I can call and that they'll pick up and they'll help me through whatever I'm going through. That was something that I was so touched by that, and it was in such a real way for me on this hike.
that's cool. So the value of community seems to come up consistently through your whole story and in ways that you never really like you didn't manufacture that. And I think that's kind of one of the cool things about the trail is there and people say it all the time, the community is unique. The people that are out there are very unique, and the connection is very real and unique. And you can't manufacture it. You can't make it that way. It just kind of is. And but you started talking about, you finished and then you were already thinking about, well, if I just went a little bit faster, if I'd prepared a little bit more, like, are you seriously thinking about doing it again?
Not right now. I think I would dream of doing it again. Like I really did on my in my like on the way home. I was like, that's what I would put in my resupply box if I were to do it again. But I feel like it's such a trap. You would think about. I don't know if that happens after you've done your different challenges that you've done. Or you're like
Oh,
you like right
100%.
after you're like I can't wait to do that again.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
also can remember being out. It was so horrible. Like it's miserable. So I could see myself trying it again. I could, but I don't have it on the calendar or anything.
Okay. Well, that is something, I've the few things that I've done in my life, but in all these conversations, I see people intentionally putting themselves in suffering after suffering. And to begin with, an objective mind would go, why would you do that? Right?
Mhm.
There's so much comfort that you could pursue and so many easy things that you could pursue. Why would you choose to do something hard and suffer? And not only that, once you finish, you're going to choose to do it again, and then once more. That part is like defies logic, and yet the human species continues to do it over and over again. And you and I are talking about ways that we do it in the outdoors and with different adventure. But I ask this in different ways in these conversations, but I'll ask you, why do you think we do that? What is the reward that continues to push you and others to intentionally put yourself in really hard situations?
I I mean, I don't fully know the answer to that, but I think there is something that I've experienced of like sort of like I mentioned in my first AT hike story, like there when you get to this point that's like so low, and then you feel the pain and the suffering in that, and then somehow there's this idea of like redemption when you come
Mm,
out of it. And for me, when I've like it's almost been sort of like a spiritual experience whenever I've had these like super super lows, and then I come out of it, and it usually involves somebody helping me out of it. Some other person, you know or nature in some way helping me out of this low point. And it just like and you kind of you come out like in a heightened state almost. And so yeah, I think it has to do with, yeah, like there is value in pain and suffering. And I think for me personally, I've had a super super fortunate life, and so I don't always get that from, I like there are a lot of comforts in my life, and I've been so fortunate with what I've had growing up and all of this. And so I think it is something that adds a value that I haven't had to go through that type of suffering in like any kind of way that's not self-induced almost, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. Certainly, there's a large swath of the global population that doesn't have to choose suffering. They live it every day, and we are very fortunate to have won in some ways, the genetic lottery to be born in the United States and grow up here, and in this particular time period of the United States, that we do have things a lot easier than a lot of other people, and we're still pulled back to push hard, find the
Mhm.
challenge, and it just makes me wonder how deep is that in our DNA, that it's so consistent across humans that it continues to drive us. And I love that. I love hearing how people execute on that drive, because it looks very different for different people, and I still think the outcome is very similar. And you're on the trail. I've talked to people that have bicycled across Europe, and a guy that has summited Everest 18 times. And but there And especially if you can weave in a purpose, like a broader
Mhm.
purpose. I would say from hearing your story, like maybe that purpose is probably community and connection. Like that seems to come up quite a bit. That really adds an element of significance to doing these things rather
Yeah.
than just doing it out of, vain pursuit or something
Well,
like that.
so that's interesting you mentioned sort of how it's deep in our DNA because I've noticed the thread of all the pursuits that I like to do. Most of them are have to do with like where I feel my roots are and like
Oh, that's
a lot
cool.
of a lot about family lineage as well.
Hmm.
And so like the Appalachian Trail for me, I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania and I lived briefly on the trail in Virginia. And then, I live now here in Western North Carolina. And so, and I would grow up going to New England. I have family up there. And so the whole corridor is sort of like home to me. And
Yeah.
so that really like the family roots and the connections with that is why I think the AT is so important to me. I also went and did a trek in Australia a few winters ago, summer there.
Yeah.
But I had two people that I knew who were like my caretakers growing up. They were au pairs who lived one in Melbourne and one in Sydney. And there's a trail that kind of connects the two. And so I thought I'll just hike between the two. So and I consider them sort of like a part of my upbringing, my family. So that was like why I chose that route. So I think that can be a thread that motivates people as well.
That's cool. That's very cool. So let's put a bow on it, and let me ask you what's next for you. If you said you're not planning anytime soon to speed hike the AT, so what do you have next?
Well, this year I'm signed up for my first 100-mile race. So there's a race they do at Mount Mitchell in May. So that's the thing I'm training for right now and excited to try out. That'll
That's awesome.
definitely be the longest I'll have gone in one go, so
100 mile or 100K?
100-mile.
Yeah, that's a big one. But is it going to be on trails that you're familiar with?
A lot of the trails I'm familiar with, yeah, yeah, and Mount Mitchell I'm very familiar with. I love that mountain and have hiked a lot on Mount Mitchell, so yeah, that's what I got coming up.
You gonna plan to do anything after that, or you just wait and see?
I think I'll just wait and see, yeah. I'd love to hike the Benton MacKaye Trail too. That's one that
Okay,
I've really wanted to do. So I might just like backpack that at some point later in the year if I get the time. But that's one that's in North Georgia, North Carolina.
that's a few
Kind of.
hundred miles. I forget how long that is.
Yeah, I think it's close to 300 somewhere around there.
Okay, yeah. There was something else. So you've got this FEMA project for 4 months. You're going to do the 100-mile race. Yeah, I guess you'll do more of the guided backpacking through the summer. Is that
Hmm.
still your plan?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me, and we'll finish at this point. I keep saying that, but I guess for anybody listening, give a quick update on how Asheville is doing post hurricane at this point.
Yeah, so I think it's been a hard time here in the region as everybody saw. I think it's better every day. But it feels a little bit depressed kind of, the trails, the trails, a lot of the the trails are open, but still there's a lot of trail maintainers working on the blowdowns and just the damage, some of the like mudslides and things that came through in terms of the trails. But there's been like an an overwhelming amount of support in terms of there's more trail maintainers than ever, and there were so many volunteers that came down just to help people with their homes and with people who lost their businesses and things. And that was like I think like the coolest part about it was to see like community come together to help each other through that. But I would say, yeah, like the region or Asheville itself is, it's recovering. It's going to be a long process. And I think people are just trying to put the pieces of their lives back together and trying to find semblances of routine if they've lost, homes or businesses or things. But I think it's like a resilient set of people for sure and a hopeful set of people. So I think it's like it's better every day and people are still chipping away at it.
That's cool. Were you directly impacted by any of the damage?
No, thankfully, no. Our house was okay, and really the worst that I got was just like lost work for the fall.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really, really lucky.
Oh, good. Good. Well, if anybody wants to find you online, are you findable? Instagram?
No, actually, I have a Facebook and a Instagram, but for 2025, I decided to try New
Digital
Year's
detox?
resolution, no social media. Yeah.
Good for
Um,
you.
yeah, I figure why not? But they can email me or whatever they want.
Back to the 90s.
They can find me on the trails in Asheville.
That's cool. Well, Jenna, I appreciate you being generous with your time to talk through this. And you've done a great job of illustrating what the everyday explorer looks like and why you do it. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks so much, Josh. It's been really good to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.